Call the meeting of the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency to order. And please rise and follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Could we have the roll call, please?
Chair Craven?
Here.
Director Nauman?
Here.
Director Kelly?
Here.
Director Borchard?
Here.
Are there any changes to the agenda?
Chair Craven, just inadvertently the weather report was left out, so you'll find that as an item. It should be on the dais there.
Okay. Public comments for items not on the agenda. Is there anyone wishing to talk to us? Come forward, please. And state your name for the record.
Good afternoon. I'm Steve Nash, resident of Oxnard. Director Craven and directors and staff. And when I first started attending these meetings and trying to get up to speed on the everything that was involved, I think from the get-go, everything I've said has tried to express my frustration over your business model. I just didn't see how it was sustainable and how you could keep promising water that you didn't have. So I think with the recent developments with the city of San Buenaventura's lawsuit having temporarily won their battle against United, I really feel that that's the first of many dominoes to fall. And I think in my city of Oxnard that we are also going to see some lawsuits over this differential pricing, and I know that you're fully aware of it, and I'm certainly not going to launch any lawsuits, but there are other people who are upset over the whole paradigm, and they want to have an answer. So anyway, I just wish that life was simpler, and an acre-foot of water for customer B was the same price as an acre-foot of water for customer B. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to us on an item that's not on the agenda? Seeing no one come forward, we will move to board member comments.
None. Not this time.
Okay, I'm not going to be at the next meeting, so I hope that all the rest of you will be here. Although Mr. Andrews has said that he would be here. Pardon? Oh. I am not seeing well. I had eye surgery. Mr. Andrews. Andy Waters. Any other alternates in the audience? Thank you. And it's my distance eye, and believe it or not, that's distant to me. Okay, so I can read. Next item is the consent calendar, which just is the minutes.
So moved to accept.
Second.
Motion and a second to accept the minutes of the previous meeting. Please, guess we don't punch buttons. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries unanimously. Informational items, Las Posas Basin update. Could we have the staff report, please?
Good afternoon, Chair Craven. My name is Kathleen Rydell with the Ventura County Watershed Protection District, here as agency staff. This morning, the Las Posas Users Group had their first meeting since our last board meeting, and one of the key points of this morning's meeting was that the discussion of expansion and use and a proposed letter with associated proposed ordinance code change was discussed this morning, and it will be coming forward from the Las Posas Users Group to the board. So I would like to introduce Mr. Robert Aranio, Chairman of the Las Posas Users Group, for further information on the meeting this morning.
Good afternoon, Chair. Robert Aranio, Crestview Mutual, and Chairman of the Los Posos Basin Users Group. As Kathleen introduced and mentioned today, over the past several months, we've been having a protracted discussion in our group dealing with expansion of use. While I'll admit that is a very small portion of expansion of use, it is one that came across within our group that we decided we wanted to tackle and try and address. And this had to deal with the fact that when agricultural interests drill their own wells out in the Los Posos Valley, and currently we've had approximately 9 of them within the County Waterworks District system, and they stop taking water from County Waterworks District, that their historical allocation moves back to the agricultural interests that drilled the well, so that they have their allocation, even though it may not be sufficient in order to meet all the demands. They have agricultural efficiency. At least we're doing a bookkeeping of making sure allocation moves from M&I back to ag in order to represent what is the demand on the basin and does not allow for a double dipping to go on. Over the past 3 months, we've had considerable discussion, and particularly in the last month, I was working very closely with County Waterworks District in order to come up with some language in order to address their concerns and difficulty in trying to find out what was the amount of allocations that were generated during the baseline period. For some M&I interest, the records from 1985 through 1989 for a specific parcel and how much water was delivered to it may not exist. So trying to find that allocation and be able to move it back to an ag interest 30-some plus years later can be a very difficult, if not impossible, chore to do. So how do we deal with those inherent difficulties that are in the system and still make this idea work? And so that was quite a lengthy discussion that went on with that. We got to a point where we are within the group that we now need to get GMA's input. The group feels comfortable enough with the proposed language and the requested ordinance change that we need to kick this out to you now in order for you to take a look at and see if we pass the test for being able to be implemented throughout the GMA, or do we have some fatal flaws in it that we did not recognize. The second thing that we discussed in extended amount of time has to do with the infrastructure study and phase 2 of that. And what we're looking for on this one is to start coming up with some numbers and some feasibility studies for how much water can come out of the arroyo and be treated and still not allow the basin to go into overdraft. And do we need to incorporate deep wells as well as shallow wells, and whereabouts would those be, and what does that RFP look like? There was considerable discussion about the Bell Ranch project and what their possible contribution could be to the solution, and whether or not their area should be incorporated into the study. And because of unclarity as to where their well is located, as to which basin it is in, we will not be expanding that outside of the Los Posos Basin. So we asked for more information from them in order to be able to consider those types of things, those impacts, at a later date. And then finally, there was a well permit that came before us that we evaluated after we had spoken about the ag to M&I, or correction, the M&I to ag transfers, and to make sure that there was no impacts on that. Our next meeting is scheduled for August 21st, and I know we're dark in August, so we'll probably have 2 meetings between now and when we come back in September.
Any questions?
May I ask?
Mr. Kelly.
Yeah, I didn't feel it was as settled as you do with regard to Waterworks 1 and 19 and the transfer. I felt a lot more emotion remaining when you closed that subject.
I understand.
I don't know what Director Borchard, who was in attendance but not near me, so I don't know what his opinion is at all. However, I found some consternation with the fact that Waterworks felt entitled to hold back some percent of their allocation to accumulate for what purpose. Secondly, that they, not having a provision for someone whose well goes down to revert back to an allocation business within the Waterworks schedule seems a bit punitive. We're moving them around. There are other people who have dual meters and are not being having their rights taken away. So why subject a well user to that a punitive situation. That seemed very self-serving on the waterworks to not want to have a methodology of moving people back and forth.
I understand what you're saying. I'd like to respond to that. I saw two issues here. One has to do with the business model and how the county waterworks chooses to do their business. And what you're talking about there is really how they choose to do their business. They'll be very different from the way Crestview will look at it and other operators that come across this. What we're looking at is a policy issue of moving allocation back. Now, whether an individual, organization, or municipal wants to be able to swap and move allocation back and forth as an ag interest needs to do repairs is an internal decision that the GMA and the ordinance has stayed away from getting inside a utilities business. And that's where I saw delineation that I agree there was some confusion, but it had more to do with the county's business model than what the discussion was or the proposed language is to the ordinance.
Well, the problem I saw with it was it's only working in one direction. So let's say you've chosen a bad well driller, and 1 month after you transfer the credits, your well fails, and now you don't have a well. Mm-hmm. Now you go back to the county to get your meter, and you have no allocation.
That's a county business decision. It's not a GMA-wide ordinance.
If this is just strictly a county business, why does the GMA even have to look at it? Obviously, it's a GMA issue, not just a county business decision.
So you get a flavor of some of the discussion.
So, just for the board's information, item number 5 on your, it was going to get into this matter in a different venue in a little more detail, and it's really asking for some board direction on the sort of this issue because it has a greater implications, obviously, than just water.
Well, that was the impression I got, was that it was going to come back for further rework, not just for approval for submission as an ordinance. I mean, after all, this is going to involve an ordinance change, correct?
It could. Certainly that has been what the proposal from LPUG, and as far as I know, that's still the proposal, but that would be
which
strictly
means
your
that's
board's
rather
decision.
binding on the recipients.
No, Director Kelly, I think you're misunderstood a little bit. I think Mr. Arania was requesting just to have GMA take a look at it, give LPUG some comments, and then they're going to work up a final to
And bring
get
it back.
a better
That's
sense of
stated in
consensus.
that manner. That's
Yes.
more what I thought we were
No,
coming here for.
Absolutely. We're
That
at
was
a
the way
point
I
where we
understood
need
it
to
at
get
the end.
GMA's input into how we're going down this road.
So what he said was what you intended.
So we can bring it back.
Okay,
Yeah.
that I'll agree with.
Yeah, we did not anticipate that they're going to accept it on the first run or that it would be agreed to be incorporated into the ordinance. It'd be nice, but I don't think that's reality.
I'm glad we all agree on what we said then.
Okay.
Robert, I got a question. You mentioned the Bell Ranch. Is that because it's out of the, almost on the, is it on the, in the basin or not in the basin? Because that's the one by Lewis Road there as you're coming into Camarillo, right?
We don't know, and they don't know. There hasn't been sufficient studies done in order to absolutely ascertain as to where that well is and which basin it's in. Is it PV? Is it West Las Posas? Is it South Las Posas? We do all agree that there is impacted water quality, but we don't know where it is into. There hasn't been sufficient subterranean groundwater and modeling and whatever the hell it is they do in order to figure out that where it's actually at. And therefore, it'd be premature for us to include them blindly into Las Posas when they could potentially be in Pleasant Valley. And we have no jurisdiction or authority to go down into Pleasant Valley and take a look at things and model things and associate with that. So we decided to, like I said, request more information from them so that we can figure out and work with them if we need to or if we can in order to see if their project is viable.
All right, thanks, Rob.
Okay. Thank you. Is there a motion to receive and file a report?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second to receive and file. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposition? Motion carries unanimously. Status update on the 2011 Groundwater Supply Enhancement Assistant Program grant projects.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Chair, Board members, Gerhard Hubner for the record. I'll just be introducing this item.
Excuse me, Chair, I'd like to compliment Mr. Hubner on his attempt at facial hair.
He said attempt. It is actually my second attempt. Hopefully the second will be better than the first. Appreciate it. It's my pleasure to introduce this item, and this, as you know, is a series of the presentations we've done on our groundwater supply enhancement program, our grant program. This is the last in the series. We have two projects that I'd like to have Tony Morgan from United come up. He's their groundwater manager and has been project manager for these studies. So with that, Tony, will you?
Good afternoon, Chair, Directors, staff. Again, I'm Tony Morgan with United Water Conservation District. I'm the Groundwater Department Manager there. I'm going to take just a brief moment to digress. Mike Solomon asked me to extend his apologies for not being here today. He's meeting with Senator Hannah Beth Jackson at this time to take a tour of the district and to go over some discussions with her on our ESA challenges and water issues in the county, state water project allocations, and the like. So that meeting and tour are going on right now. So he asked me to extend his apologies for not attending. As Gerhard mentioned, the district was the recipient of 2 grants, and I'm going to give you a summary of the conclusions and the outcomes of those 2 efforts. The first one we have up here is the Recharge Evaluation Project. The rationale behind this is that the district needed some supplemental information on the recharge that occurs along the Santa Clara River. Okay, in this reach right here. It's pretty important, as the directors are well aware, of how important the forebay is to the overall groundwater supply out on the Oxnard Plain. And so additional information is needed as the conditions in the river are changing. And by that I mean, for example, we're now releasing more water through Vern Freeman diversion for fish passage purposes, and so there's additional water reaching this segment of the river that historically there has not been. So our idea is to get a better idea of what's happening to that water and how is it impacting the shallow groundwater system. So we speculated on about 11 positions, which are shown by the blue dots here, for the construction of some new shallow piezometers. And we took a look at how close they were to our existing facilities, how close we could get to the river, looked for some sort of spatial distribution up and down the river, and then the ever popular, make sure we could actually get a drill rig to that spot on the landscape, and avoiding any sensitive environmental areas. So we ended up with 11 locations here, shown on this graphic. We ended up with 11 new piezometers. Okay. The general process was to collect water quality samples from them and to equip them with pressure transducers so we could get additional water level monitoring. Now, our water level monitoring in this area is the shallow aquifer. These are only about 100 to 110 foot deep piezometers. And so our idea is not to monitor the upper system or the lower system, but just that general first water we see that would be most impacted due to, for example, additional flows through Vern Freeman diversion for fish passage purposes. So as the project advanced, we ended up with 11 new piezometers. Okay. We got permits from Ventura County, including a filing of a CEQA categorical exemption, well permits, not the least of which is we had to negotiate with several landowners to get access for this well construction activity. So all went pretty well in the field, no big hiccups. And we collected water quality samples and got the pressure transducers installed. So I thought it would be interesting to take a look at some of the preliminary data that's come out of these shallow wells there. What you see up there now are total dissolved solids, a basic water quality parameter that we measure for a lot of wells. And so we see general trends. In the upper part of the basin, we have total dissolved solids that are 2,000, 2,200, something like that, milligrams per liter. And they decrease a bit and end up in the 800 to 1,000 by the time the river reaches the south end of the forebay basin there. We have a similar pattern with sulfates, high values in this part of the basin, generally decreasing as you go downriver or away from the river, in the case of this piezometer installed over here by the Noble Basin. Nitrates are a whole lot less variable, okay, maybe running from about 5 to 13 milligrams per liter, so it's interesting to see what that distribution looks like. Not a whole lot of variability across the basin. One of the biggest things we were interested in is the changes in water levels that we see over time. And so I can't plot the hydrographs up there for each one of these wells. It would just make the screen too cluttered. So I've put in 3 wells, one sort of at the top of the system, midpoint in the system, and at the southern end of the basin. So we can see some general trends here. If you focus your attention on the blue lines on each one of the graphs, that's the water level elevation here. The green line is temperature in the wells. We don't necessarily need to go through the meanings of the temperature today. The water levels have a much more prominent story. So these graphs are constructed to show that's April 1st of 2012 and going out to our most recent readings. So what we're seeing here is in these up and mid basin wells, we're seeing the water levels in the shallow aquifer respond to these late storm events that occurred in 2012. So we see that response there. But what we also see is a long, slow decline. And it's pretty amazing to see these 2 wells have almost an identical response. All 3 wells flatten out in this period of time, which is representative of the fall conservation release from Santa Felicia Dam last year. So we can see it stabilized water levels in the shallow aquifer there, but only for a period of time. Then after a couple of months, that effect wore off, and we resumed the decline, although in all 3 instances, not nearly as severely as before the conservation release. So it did have effect on it. It delayed the falling water levels. Okay. So this is a pretty standard trend we see all across the basin. If you just plot up the water level changes in the shallow aquifer since April of 2012, these are the changes that you see occurring in the shallow system there. So pretty dramatic. It's ranging from 21 up here to as much as 41, but generally in the 20s and 30s being a pretty representative value. And that trend is likely to continue into the near future. It's possible that before this winter season is over, we may see 2 or 3 of these piezometers go dry. The water level will fall that much. So this is really important information for the district to have. It's going to be factored into the regional groundwater flow model. It has bearings on how we operate from a policy standpoint. What's the impact of us spreading here, for example, and how much of that water makes it back to surface water flow in the river, and how does that complement or not our efforts for fish passage and those kinds of things. The second project, totally different kind of work. This, we used a surface geophysical method to explore beneath the forebay and look for some definition of aquifers, faulting, and that kind of thing that we'd see there. So we used a technique called time domain electromagnetics. And the essence of how it works is we have a large loop of wire, large meaning 350 feet on its side, a square loop laid out on the ground, and we induce a current into that, and we create secondary magnetic fields. With this we infer resistivity, and that's enough of the physics as we probably need to discuss, and we'll move on to some of the conclusions. Nonetheless, we can get to some inference as to what the subsurface looks like from this geophysical data. So we took 139 soundings out there. That's soundings meaning data points. That's what each one of these little red and green dots mean out here. The red dots are just representative of what we did the first field season, and the green dots the second field season. And the field seasons are important in that we had to coordinate our data collection in between those periods when there weren't crops in the field. And I must say, we've had remarkably good cooperation from landowners out there. I think there's only one person who turned us down and said no, that we couldn't come on their property and do our readings. And we went back to them this year and asked again, and they said okay. Everybody, all their neighbors were doing it, so they said okay. So it worked out really well, and we were really pleased that we were getting that kind of cooperation. So the yellow and blue lines you see on here is we made cross-sections of the data, and we'll show you those here in just a moment as to what those mean. One of the things that we were looking for is the presence or absence of faulting. There's been additional faulting that's not necessarily depicted in the USGS's regional groundwater flow model and other studies that have been done in the area. One of those is the El Rio fault that comes through here. There's called the Cold fault through here. And then there are multiple splays of the Oak Ridge fault that run through here, some of which run through the forebay. So if we're going to build a new groundwater flow model, we need to know where those faults are. Do they offset aquifers? Is there a displacement there? And we need to adjust for that in the model. So that was one of the things that we wanted to look at. The other thing was what's going on at the basin boundaries. What's the transition from the forebay to the Oxnard Plain or mound to the forebay really look like? So this kind of cuts to the chase as to what the data looks like. So we collected 139 soundings out there, processed the data, and built these panels, these cross sections that run at various angles across the basin. And in general, you call this thing a fence diagram. And so you use this kind of diagram to infer some things. And let's look at this profile here running down the river, basically the length of the river. It sort of substantiates that we're feeling comfortable with the geophysical technique to predict what's going on out the field. The blue zones, which represent Fox Canyon, etc., come up shallower to the ground surface up near South Mountain. They're deeper down here in this part of the basin where we would expect them. Things change at the basin boundary right here. So we were feeling pretty good that it represents the geology out there. If we look at it in a little more detail, we did take into account the borehole geophysical logs. So a lot of times when water wells are drilled, or certainly when oil and gas wells are drilled, they do downhole geophysical surveys where you get very detailed geophysical data that you infer characteristics of the formations. And so basically from a geophysics perspective, from our time domain data, we have a three-layer system. We have this upper red zone here, which is the highly resistive area. That's the red, the hot colors there. The less resistive is the blue colors here. So we have a three-layer system. We've got the hot colors here, the blue colors here, and then the intermediate zone in between. So the red zone, the upper zone, represents sort of the, well, let's go back to this line right here. This represents roughly the Oxnard-Magoo aquifer boundary from the E-logs. So our layer one is sort of all of the Oxnard and a little bit of the Magoo. Okay, this is the lower Wanimi and the Fox Canyon, and then the rest of the Magoo and the Wanimi are in the green. So a three-layer system that corresponds reasonably well with the hydrostratigraphy out there. So if we looked at that same long river panel that we looked at before, we can see that layer 3 is sloping up towards the ground surface, towards South Mountain. Okay, we see differentiation at the aquifer or at the basin boundaries. Here's the plain forebay boundary about right here. So we're feeling fairly comfortable that we're getting reasonable data there. We sometimes play around with the scales of the data, meaning that we adjust this color bar so we can go from 0 to 100, or we can go from 0.001 to 100. And if we get the same color patterns, the same things there, we feel more confident that the data are representative. So the colors are absolutely different, but the same trends are apparent in the data. So we're feeling, again, confident in what we're doing here. Let's look at a couple of interesting things that we found. This is the forebay, plain, mound, intersection area, and we had two profiles that go across the mound forebay boundary. This anomalous zone right here, this little green blip right in the middle, is just about perfectly aligned with the Oak Ridge Fault, or at least one of the Oak Ridge faults as mapped by the USGS. There's multiple lines of it, but it does line up with one of them pretty well. And so if you take the profile, which is T to T prime, that's over here, and U to U prime, which is over here, and I've scrunched them up so they all fit on the same page right here, we see no matter what scale we look at the data, and on both of the cross sections, we see the same sort of anomalous zone right here that is suggestive of the Oak Ridge Fault there. The important thing we're trying to look at is where is this fault stopped? Does it go way up? Does it transect across the aquifers, the shallow aquifers there, or not? We can see that things on this side of the fault, the resistivities, don't look the same as on this side of the fault. So there's something going on there, depositional environment or whatever, that tells us that there's a difference. And those have to be modeled different in the regional groundwater flow model. Let's go back to our big panels here again and take a look at some of these in more detail. The basin boundary here is different. You'll notice how the blue disappears right here as we approach the Oxnard Plain versus forebay boundary. Things change in this part of the world. Things definitely change along this cross section. So it's mimicking and giving us the information that we think is reasonable. It's consistent with what we know about the geology, and it's reaffirming the kind of transition. It's not just a perfect vertical line there. It's a gradational change between the environments in those two basins. Let's look at 4 of these cross-section lines, 4 of these panels. So there's L through O, sort of going north to south through them, and talk just for a moment about those. So again, we're going north to south in these panels. And in each one of these things, we see data that is suggestive that there is faulting there that isn't necessarily shown on some of the USGS maps, nor on some of the geology that was used in the existing groundwater flow model. So let's just take a look at this one, for example. That's very suggestive that there's a fault there. As you see, this is offset here. Same thing over here. We got this offset. This one here is going to here. So it's beyond the scope of what we wanted to do in this investigation to know whether the fault actually goes up and down like this, or is it more like this. Most faults in this basin tend to be more vertical than not, so we've depicted them in this fashion. So there's lots of information here to suggest that there are other faults that need to be taken into account in the model. And one of the things that we are most interested in is how far does this extend up? So from the data we see right here, we don't necessarily see any offset in these upper system aquifers. That's important for the model. It tells us that we need to deal with it in the lower system down here, but maybe not so much in the upper system. So a lot of interesting conclusions to be drawn from this. Again, we appreciate the board's and staff's confidence in us and supporting us with these grants. And if there are questions, I will attempt to give you some answers.
Questions?
Yes.
Yeah, I forgot to check the table. Did you have these on printouts, your slides in the front?
I do not believe they're out there, no.
Okay. My problem is I have some of Charlotte's illness too. I can't see it so well. So
Sort of like me, they have to be way out here.
yeah, that would
I
work.
got it. Yeah.
Could you maybe just burn those off and mail them, me a copy of them?
Surely.
I would
Surely.
appreciate it.
I think Jessica
Thank you.
has them.
We can do that.
Yeah.
We have a copy of it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you very
All right,
much.
thank you.
Is there a motion to receive and file this report?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries unanimously. Annual Basin Management Objectives Progress Report.
Good afternoon, Chair Craven and directors. My name, for the record, is Kathleen Rydell, and I'm here to present item 4, Annual Basin Management Objectives Progress Report. The purpose of this item is to provide an update of the status of groundwater conditions and progress towards meeting the agency's basin management objectives. The agency's basin management objectives, also known as BMOs, Report cards are used to communicate status of groundwater conditions and progress towards meeting the agency's goals and evaluating effectiveness of the agency's current groundwater management strategies. By comparing current groundwater levels and water quality measurements against the BMOs, we get a sense of how well the management strategies are working. I'd like to bring your attention to, in your packets are black and white copies of the BMO report cards. Color copies have been provided as inserts in your packets. And additionally, the letter that was put in the packet provides an executive summary presented near the beginning of the board letter. I would like to present the summary at the end of this presentation. The core goals of the groundwater management plan are tied to protecting water quality for beneficial uses. Two of the primary goals are to prevent saline intrusion from various sources and protect public supply wells from nitrates. Saline intrusion affects both agricultural, municipal, and domestic beneficial uses. Nitrates impact municipal and domestic beneficial uses. Typically, in overdraft situations, the problems of groundwater quality degradation or other problems such as unacceptable pump lifts or subsidence are faced before water supply is exhausted. If successful at protecting water quality in the aquifers, will generally be successful in addressing overdraft. In the 2007 update of the FCGMA Groundwater Management Plan, there were established 52 basin management objectives to serve as quantitative performance metrics. And that is 26 locations. Some of the locations are a single location, but different level zones in those wells that are being monitored. Each BMO location has 2 different metrics. What happened? I lost the slide. There's the slide. Oh, it's changed since I put it together. This is a BMO report card. This is what it looks like. It identifies a basin at the top of the form. It identifies the goals for that basin. It provides the basin management objectives for that basin. It provides a status summary. It provides a table for each one of the basin management objectives, the wells. It gives both a quantitative and visual reading or evaluation of how it meets, whether it exceeds or is below the BMO. The green is positive that we are meeting the basin management objective. Yellows are caution, we're getting close to that basin management objective, and red means that we are not in compliance. And then at the bottom, the map shows the BMO locations. In general, the summary table presents the BMO locations from north to south and from west to east. As I should note that of the 52 BMOs in 2012, not all of them had data available. 7 of the BMOs, 2 in the East Las Posas Basin, 2 in the West Las Posas Basin, and 2 in the South Las Posas Basin, and 1 in the Arroyo Santa Rosa Basin, data was not available in 2012. And that the agency relies on data collected by others, and staff is working towards making sure that this coming year that those locations are monitored and included on the sampling list. For individuals interested in reviewing the historical trends, time series plots of groundwater levels and constituent concentrations are available upon request. They have also been posted to the FCGMA.org website. The report cards are basically basin by basin. There are 6 report cards prepared. The first one, they're the Oxnard Plain 4-Bay Basin, the Oxnard Plain Upper Aquifer System, Oxnard Plain Lower Aquifer System, the Pleasant Valley Basin, Arroyo Santa Rosa Basin, and then the Las Posas basins have been combined. So for the Oxnard Plain, or Oxnard forebay, the BMOs are for nitrate and total dissolved solids. Status is that the average nitrate and total dissolved solids concentrations were well below their respective BMOs in 2012. With regard to the 5-year trends, nitrate concentrations have remained the same general range as they were in 2008. The average total dissolved solids concentration of samples collected at El Rio number 5, you can see the two wells very close together there, is higher than the average concentration in samples collected in 2008. However, the El Rio 15, the average TDS concentration was approximately the same as in 2008.
How far apart are they?
I don't have the actual distances. I could get back to you with that.
Just curious.
Oxnard Plain Upper Aquifer System, the BMOs are for groundwater levels and chloride. In 2012, water level BMOs were met in all wells except those located near Point Magoo. And in general, the average annual water levels declined approximately 1 foot during 2012. Consistent with past results, chloride BMOs were not met near Port Hueneme and Point Magoo. With regard to the 5-year trend, the water levels are generally the same as those in 2008, with the exceptions of the inland and near Point Magoo, where water levels have risen slightly, approximately 5 to 2 feet, during the past 5 years. Chloride concentrations have been stable at all but 2 of the BMOs, and chloride concentrations have declined at the BMO location near Port Hueneme and increased near Point Magoo. The Oxnard Plain Basin Lower Aquifer System, the BMOs are for groundwater and for chloride. In 2012, water levels, BMOs were not met. Average water levels at the 5 locations were significantly below their respective BMOs, up to 71 feet below BMO near the shared boundary with the Pleasant Valley Basin at PTP-1. Consistent with past results, chloride BMOs are not met near Port Hueneme and Point Magoo. With regard to the 5-year trends, in general, water levels have remained steady within the range of annual fluctuations to rising slightly, with the exception of water level at Point Magoo, and chloride concentrations have remained stable or declining during the past 5 years in the Fox Canyon Aquifer, except for at Point Magoo. For the Pleasant Valley Basin, the BMOs are groundwater levels and chloride concentrations. In 2012, water level BMOs were not met at either BMO location. Chloride BMOs were at the southern location, were met. Let's see. Chloride concentrations were not met at PV number 4, but was met at PV number 10. For the 5-year trends in general, water levels at both locations rose during the last 5 years. Chloride concentrations at both locations have been increasing over the past 7 to 10 years, and over the past 20 years, chloride concentrations at the southern location have remained below the BMO, while concentrations at the northern location have fluctuated above and below the BMO of 150 milligrams per liter. In the Arroyo Santa Rosa Basin, the BMOs are for nitrate and chloride. In 2012, the nitrate concentration BMO was not met at either BMO location, and the chloride concentration was not available at the western BMO location, and the chloride concentration was below the BMO at DO1, 25 DO1. but it's close to the BMO. The 5-year trend, nitrate concentrations are estimated to be about the same as they were in about 2008. Chloride concentration at the western location has generally been increasing since 1999. In the Las Posas basins, the BMOs are for chloride and total dissolved solids. No data was available for 3 of the 6 BMO monitoring locations for 2012. Chloride and total dissolved solids BMOs were not met in the East Las Posas Basin, which are located within the expanding plume of poor quality water. The chloride and total dissolved solids BMOs were met at 1 well in the West Las Posas Basin, at which monitoring was performed, and no monitoring data was available for the South Las Posas Basin. With regard to the 5-year trend, in the East Las Posas Basin, chloride and total dissolved solids concentrations over the last 5 years have been gradually increasing. The available data for the West Las Posas Basin indicate that chloride and total dissolved solids concentrations over the last 5 years were stable to decreasing at the BMO locations. As water levels have been an issue, I prepared, it doesn't quite show the colors very well, modifying the Ventura County Watershed Protection District 2012 Groundwater Section Annual Report, colorizing it so that it should be yellow, but you can see the slight difference. That the yellows and oranges and reds represent levels below sea level, and the greens, which are sort of a grayish, going to blues, are above sea level. So you can see what the upper aquifer potentiometric surface looks like. And then this one is for the lower aquifer potentiometric surface. Those that are yellow, orange, and going into reds are below sea level, and areas that are shaded in green and shades of blue are above sea level. And then I have also plotted the BMO locations so you can see where they are with respect to the cones of depression, and arrows have been added to show the hydraulic gradient. Among the greatest exceedances of the BMOs in 2012 are water levels below the BMO by up to 71 feet, average, well, that's the average value, at PTP-1 and 66 feet in the Pleasant Valley. Chloride concentrations exceeding the BMOs by 16,800 milligrams per liter and 11,650 milligrams per liter. Those are the 2 highest values, exceedances. Nitrate concentrations above the BMO by 19 milligrams per liter, and total dissolved solid concentrations above the BMO by 1,040 milligrams per liter.
Kathleen, could you just clarify which basins those are, the exceedances? In those last slide, or
Okay, the nitrates, going back, the 71 feet is inland, and it's the Oxnard Plain lower aquifer system for where it is below, the water levels are below the BMO by 71 feet. The BMO for chlorides, it's the 16,800 milligrams per liter at Point Magoo. It's the Oxnard Plain upper aquifer system. It's CMA-220. And the 11,650 milligrams at Port Hueneme, Oxnard Plain lower aquifer system. That's CM2-760. That's the depth at which the sample was taken. The screened interval is about 760 feet. And the nitrate concentrations, 19 milligrams per liter in the Arroyo Santa Rosa Basin. And the TDS above the BMO by 1,040 is in the East Las Posas Basin. Okay. In summary, the primary areas of concern remain that the Oxnard Plain And Pleasant Valley Basin's depressed water levels continue to allow conditions under which salts from the oceans and other geologic sources can potentially migrate into the aquifers. Areas of greatest concern are the coastal portions of the Oxnard Plain Basin near Port Hueneme and Point Mugu, and the Pleasant Valley Basin where intrusion has been previously documented. Salt migration would be expected to increase during an extended drought. And the Las Posas Basin's poor quality water continues to migrate northward into the East Las Posas Basin from sources in the South Las Posas Basin. Although the current set of BMO locations is not situated to illustrate this movement, the new BMO locations proposed in the Las Posas Basin-specific groundwater management plan should better document the poor quality water migration. And as you remember that there are a number of BMO locations that we were not able to monitor in the Las Posas Basins, they have, in the basin-specific groundwater management plan, increased the number of BMO locations for monitoring in that plan once it's adopted. Plus, it has a better scatter distribution so you can better see the migration of salts, say, as it comes through the South Las Posas, migrates towards the East Las Posas. In the Arroyo Santa Rosa Basin, nitrate and chloride concentrations remain a concern, although there are limited data available for evaluation in this basin. Are there any questions?
Questions? Yes.
Yeah, on Las Posas, you lost 2 data wells?
The data has not been available. We receive the data from others. Agency staff does not do the sampling or monitoring, so we're dependent on others to collect that data and provide it to us.
But we're trying to correct that for next time.
Because I know you'd lost one and they called and asked, that's why we put a down tube in one of our wells. But this was like a couple years ago.
I'm not sure about that one, but I know on these we checked and they just weren't sampled. Am I right, Kathleen?
I understand. I'm not certain whether they are no longer available, that it's changed ownership, or something has happened to those wells. But
Well, we'll continue to check, and if they're not available, we'll substitute it somehow.
When I got that call, it was because one well was being decommissioned, and so they were looking for an alternative nearby. And I'm wondering if you just didn't realize the alternative was already available. And the second thing is, I know the answer, but I've forgotten what the answer. What is pure seawater's chloride content?
I don't have that off the top
Tony,
of my
do you,
head.
off the top of your head, know?
15, 16,000.
So that the one sample there then is near pure seawater. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Just a quick comment for the record, Brian Bondi, Cayugas. I'd like to thank Rick Vergoots. We met, was it last week? We spent about 2 hours going over monitoring the Las Posas Basin and looked at all the different wells that are available, who's doing what, whether you're talking about Cayugas or individual well owners, as well as Ventura County Watershed Protection District's efforts to monitor. And I think we have a good plan moving forward to make sure that we're getting a good volume of data that's geographically spread out in the Las Posas Basin. So just the message is we're working on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would add that the county groundwater section staff collects some of the data, and one of the things we talked about is coordinating that, and there are times when we go out to collect the data where the wells aren't available. So sometimes it takes multiple trips for the county, and so we're trying to make that more efficient for us and still collect that data. So,
thank you.
Okay, I got a question. Rick, do you need more sites? Is that what I'm hearing under the undertow, is that you're looking for more additional sites within the whole basin?
right now we're okay with what we have, but moving down the line we may need additional sites for both water quality and water level.
I think at the time we were discussing it, was it Lipscomb? What was the fellow's name who used to collect the samples?
Well, prior, maybe you're talking about Glenn Luscombe, but it might have been Jimmy Capito did it for the county
I think
for
I
many,
might have
many
spoken to
years.
both of them. When some wells get decommissioned, they have a long history on that well, so then that no longer is there.
Right.
And my prayer in talking to him was that if we could not maybe in them concreting the well, if we couldn't maybe keep a down tube in the well for future.
Right. No, that's a good point. And in the past, I think there may have been opportunities missed for that. So we're more careful now to tell people that when their well reaches the end of its life cycle, the county does provide them an option to convert it to a monitoring well.
Perfect.
Not everybody takes us up on it, but it's available. Some people would rather just
Say a
destroy
prayer
it and
before
be
you
done
ask.
with it.
It's better say a prayer before you ask, because it's. I mean, it just seems to me to lose that long history. You know, your reference points go away.
Right.
Thank you.
The basin management objectives that were reported on in the report cards are those that are listed in the 2007 groundwater management plan. And I know that an update to that plan is coming due. And so that would be something to look at to see if we want to change the number and where the monitoring is being done. So for the board's consideration in the future.
Okay, item number 5, request for new well permit. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Dale Zarowski from the Farm Bureau, and very good report on the groundwater monitoring. And I'm just wondering, 2 questions. Is your nitrate level measured as NO3? Because I noticed one of your basin management objectives was 45 for nitrate. Are you guys measuring NO3, or do you know if it's just N that you're looking at in those numbers that you're reporting there?
I'd have to get
Okay.
back.
All right.
Either 10 or 45 should be consistent.
Okay. So my question there is, have you considered adding, I know you have different objectives at different sites, and 56 is quite a few basin management objectives already, but have you considered adding nitrate to all of your monitoring locations and maybe making a changement in a general plan, just because it does protect against, for human health purposes, and also for the conditional waiver that agriculture runs under. We're not currently doing groundwater management, and one of the reasons it's not being required of individual farms is that the GMA has a groundwater monitoring program that includes nitrates. So I guess I would just be asking for comment from staff if you've considered adding nitrate to all of your locations. Thank you.
We, in fact, do that through the county through the Watershed Protection District funds groundwater sampling throughout the county, and I think nitrate is one of the suite of constituents we regularly monitor. Is that right, Greg? I speak out of turn.
Come over to the microphone, please.
Yeah, Gerhardt's absolutely correct, and I wonder if your question was more about rolling in nitrate into the next groundwater management plan for the agency.
Yeah, that was the question.
We only have BMOs for nitrate in several locations. That, of course, can be expanded at any point.
If I could maybe add that to the discussion, or give me a call when you guys get ready to discuss that and talk about the possibility of adding it to your other BMOs.
Yeah, it's anticipated we're going to start talking to the board about the next update in September. You'll want to be around for that.
Okay.
Anybody who wants input into that, there'll be a number of things that we'll be suggesting the board look at.
Okay, great. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay,
Chair,
request.
just one quick
sorry.
comment was that, it seems to me that we had a lot of colors and graphs and lines that begin to kind of blur things, but the take-home message, it seems to me, is that one might, on the outside, be kind of disappointed looking at our groundwater, and in some cases, things don't look so good. If you take into account the drought we're experiencing and the reduced flows down the Santa Clara River and releasing water for fish, and United's not going to make full deliveries on the PTP pipeline this year. None of this is surprising, really, that we're at where we're at. And I think more interesting, or maybe more important, is to look at the trends, those 5-year and longer trends about kind of where things are going. And maybe not get too excited about immediate, what we're seeing in a short-term causation.
In fact, if I may, we've had a meeting scheduled to discuss that for some time. We had a meeting on that yesterday, the long-term trends. That will be part of the September presentation. We hope to be able to compare the trends subsequent to the GMA's formation to what it was like before the GMA's formation, so your board to get some sort of at least qualitative feel for the effectiveness of its programs and policies.
I think that'd be real helpful.
Anything else?
Yeah, actually, Tony, you've got some data that goes back a lot of years also with rainfall records and trends too, right? So Jeff, I would recommend working with Tony for this information that we already have compiled at United.
Will do, and that's been discussed. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a motion to receive and file that report?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposition? Motion carries unanimously. Now, requests for new well permits in the Pleasant Valley Basin. Could we have the staff report, please?
Good afternoon, Chair Craven and directors. For the record, my name is Rick Virgutz. I'll be presenting item number 5 today. And this is an information item, as Executive Officer Pratt mentioned earlier. In June, the agency received 2 well permit requests for wells in the Pleasant Valley Basin. And we waited for some additional information, the county well permit as required by the agency's ordinance code, and we received that, and we issued these well permits in July, and they're under construction. But there were some interesting things that came about as we looked at these applications, and we determined it would be a good idea to just brief your board on some of these issues. The applications were for 2 wells, both in the Pleasant Valley area. Both actually were submitted by the same grower. And the first well was for a replacement well, which wasn't immediately apparent with the application. But that replacement well will exist on a parcel that has other wells with a combined allocation, historic allocation of a little over 300 acre-feet a year. So that's not insignificant. The proposed farming is 140 acres, and the proposed water use is 245 acre-feet a year. And the past state for this parcel, and the other parcel for that matter, is that they've been served only by Pleasant Valley County Water District for some time. The future state for this parcel would be on an irrigation efficiency allocation or using their historic allocation. The second well exists on a parcel without any wells that have a historic allocation, so they have 0 historic allocation. It's 150 acres. Their proposed extraction is 262 acre-feet. Again, served by Pleasant Valley County Water District. In this case, they don't have an on-site well. And their allocation for the new well will be for irrigation efficiency only. So these 2 applications, these 2 wells, represent an increase of about 3.5% in basin extractions from the 2002 reported levels. We don't have records indicating if any historic allocation has been earned on any other wells that serve these parcels. And I'm going to expand a little bit on that just in general. It'll tie in to some of what Robert Aranio mentioned earlier today, and then I'll get back to the basics with these, and then we'll move on. So determining the previous historic allocation that served that land is something that GMA staff routinely does when we look at these well permits. It can allow the well owner to retain it where it was earned, and GMA likes to capture that at the time that well permits are issued, because when well permits are issued, that's typically when the allocation is provided. We don't provide well permits without telling the new well owner how much the GMA would authorize them to pump. So sometimes this historic allocation comes from on-site wells, and then sometimes it may have been earned by a water supplier by serving that parcel from an off-site well. So just keying in on what Robert Aranio said earlier, the Las Posas Users Group is looking at Waterworks District, but they recognize that this issue actually covers multiple water suppliers throughout the GMA. So sometimes these historic allocations, which have been used to serve these parcels, were earned from off-site wells operated by a water supplier. And so in those cases, it's less clear what the GMA should do in that case. So some of the questions that you'll be asked, and I got ahead of myself, but one of the questions that has come up is should that historic allocation from that off-site well be transferred to the new well owner? So that's not required under the agency rules right now, and I think that's one of the things that your board will be discussing in the future. And because I did skip ahead, I do want to cover this second bullet. I mentioned that it's less clear what the agency does in this case. What we do is provide efficiency-only allocations in these cases. That's the current process. So creating efficiency allocations while failing to link a historic allocation to a new well allows that historic allocation to be used somewhere else. And so that creates some uncertainty in the environmental review process. The Las Posas Users Group in the past has asked us about this with the Waterworks District, where we looked at the proposed extractions. And the question was asked, well, if that allocation stays with the Waterworks District, will it be pumped? And the answer was we weren't certain, because we don't get into what the Waterworks District does. We can't require that they transfer that allocation. So there's some uncertainty in the environmental review process, and ultimately it may cause an expansion of use, which is also a Las Posas Users Group concern. So getting back to these two well permits, the water level basin management objectives are not met in the Pleasant Valley Basin BMO wells. And as Kathleen mentioned, the chloride continued to be high in one of the BMO wells, BMO well 4. The ordinance code does not restrict construction of new wells in the Pleasant Valley Basin. The permits are essentially like a ministerial permit. The 2007 Groundwater Management Plan does not identify any special considerations for well permitting in the Pleasant Valley Basin. And so both of these wells have been approved. And building on Kathleen's map that she showed you earlier, what I've done here is I've shown, and it's kind of hard to see, I know we provided your board color copies, but these two red stars are these two new well permits that we're talking about. So one is up here, the water levels between spring and fall 2012 varied from about 0 feet above sea level to 40 feet below sea level. And this well over here, the water levels are much lower. This is actually near Howling, and there's a localized or larger cone of depression there where the water levels can be up to about 100 feet below sea level. So that's where these two new wells are going. And this well here will be operating on efficiency only, the one further south. So we feel it's important for your board to know that, at least for this particular request, we did not identify, we have not identified, if historic allocation was earned on wells that supplied water to that southern parcel, that 150-acre parcel. And I described to you why we look to try and determine that. If it was earned, if historic allocation was earned, it could potentially be transferred to the new well owner, new well operator, mitigating unnecessary creation of new extraction allocations. So we're getting into the expansion of use concerns. And the BMOs for the Pleasant Valley Basin are not being met, so there's some concern about adding in additional allocations. The permits in the well permits in the Pleasant Valley Basin are not subject to environmental review, and the existing agency rules essentially require that they be approved if they have the required information on the form. So there's some concern about the new well permits.
Excuse me, Rick.
Yes, David.
Back up one slide. Existing agency rules essentially require staff approve all groundwater extraction well permits in the Pleasant Valley Basin, if they just fill out the form properly.
That's correct.
Is that true?
Yes, that's correct. And understand that the way
That's your assessment of the current ordinance.
That's not, it's really not the agency ordinance, it's more the county ordinance. What it's about is the county making sure that it knows where the wells go in, that they're monitored and abandoned properly. So it's more of like a protection. The way it's been explained to me by some of the people around here historically is the GMA really doesn't have an ability to limit somebody's pumping. They just have the ability to say, if you're going to pump this much, this is what's going to happen to you. So extrapolating from that, they really don't have the ability, it would seem, they don't have the ability, we can explore this, to say, no, you can't drill that well. We just have the ability to say, if you drill that well and you use it more than thus and such, there might be a penalty. So Rick's terminology and the way he's describing things are incomplete. We don't tell people you get an efficiency allocation. The code says if you don't have anything else and you're in ag, you can apply for efficiency. We don't give them an efficiency, and we never prevent them from pumping. We say if you pump beyond a certain level, and I'm talking about the historical allocation particularly, you're going to be subject to certain penalties. And these are all things that your board has to take into consideration when it formulates the policies around how we do this business. And we've never gotten into, so as to date, we've never gotten into any of the water companies' businesses. But this may be obvious to you, but I just want to make sure you understand it. The historical allocation period was 85 to 89, I believe.
Yes.
So if you're ag and you don't have a well on your property and you're receiving water from a water company, and I'll just use Pleasant Valley because that's a case in point. Pleasant Valley actually earned the historical allocation giving you the water. You may have earned it by virtue of your use of that water, but the allocation went to Pleasant Valley. So LPUG's point is, if that allocation went because they were the ones who awarded it during the baseline period, and you pull off and put your well there, there should be a certain amount of that, whatever that allocation was, goes back to the property. We don't have any way of tracking that. I don't know that the water companies do. And so what has come up is this sort of, in the one case where the issue's been pressed, the Waterworks District 1, sort of, well, what do I do? Well, I'm just going to take my total ag allocations, which I know, and I'm going to divide it by my total acres of ag, and if you pull off of my Waterworks District 1, I'm going to give you X number, however many acres you got, times that number, and in that case of Waterworks District 1, I believe it's around 1 acre foot, 1.1, that's a small number, and that's going to be the historical allocation I peel off my district. And that's partially because there's no way to know in certain cases where all the allocation came from. So it's an issue that's just pregnant with problems, and one we're probably going to have to peel back sort of a layer at a time.
And Director Borchard, if I could just add, historically, this agency has chosen to rely on the county's ordinance for controlling construction of new wells, with the exception being new well permits in the Las Posas Basin. But under the GMA's Act, if the agency chose to be more active in the area of controlling construction of new wells, it could do that, but it would have to act via ordinance, which does not currently exist. So the statement on the slide is correct.
Thanks. This is an entire series of meetings, I think, in itself.
And the county issuings of their permits is a ministerial action, not a discretionary. So we don't do CEQA.
Jeff, is there, in this, that would be something we would take to like a committee and start working with staff?
It is, and your direction, your board's direction at this point would assume that would probably go to executive because it would be full of the policy issues. And I'm sure, I mean, many of you may know what Rube Goldberg means. I mean, we're just going to be deconstructing that mousetrap and trying to rebuild it, I suppose, in those committee meetings, which gets to Board Member Borchard's comment. All this comes about as we keep appending ideas to old ideas, and we've got this huge structure, Rube Goldberg structure of, and it's not easy to take one piece of it out and without affecting the rest of it.
That's how Bill Gates built Microsoft, and that's why it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's that ripple effect, right? Yeah.
Okay.
So there is concern about what we call new well permits and new extraction allocations. And when I say new, what I'm talking about are new wells, not replacement wells. I'm talking about new wells in the agency and the allocations that go with those new wells. And the concern is, about what the effect is on the agency. So these new wells are occurring on land previously supplied by water suppliers, off-site wells, and where they may have earned a historic allocation for serving that. And these concerns, and I'll show you a map in a moment, these concerns aren't limited to Pleasant Valley. Robert Aranio mentioned they also exist in the Las Posas area. And the Las Posas Users Group has been discussing this, and we expect that it'll be heard at an executive committee, and ultimately your board may be asked to consider changing its ordinance code to kind of better reallocate water if that's what the agency decides it should do. Okay.
That wasn't still Lynn on the phone, was it?
She doesn't have my number. No, she has my number. She's at SeaWorld today, actually, with the kids. Okay.
Rick, if we can back up a second.
Sure.
Just so you know, Rick and I have had this discussion a little bit, and actually, in fairness, one of the wells is being put on one of the places I rent and lease from. I think we need to go into this, in this discussion, go into the Pleasant Valley Water District, like what Robert Ronio indicated earlier, and figure out a process. It's, your comment about 3.5% increase, reality is probably there's going to be no increase because it's either use one or the other. I don't anticipate anybody doing on either one of these well projects, tapping into district water, because they're a secondary water supply, not a primary, and doing well water. So it's either one or the other. So the continual usage going on will probably stay the same. The only difference is Pleasant Valley also gets surface water diversions, other than the wells are pumping.
And won't they earn credits on unused allocation?
Exactly.
I mean, there's just a whole...
It's a chain that keeps running. Rick and I talked for half an hour. We still didn't complete everything. But you've got, on this parcel, it's got a well that was drilled in 1925, back when the sugar beet factory and all that stuff was going on. And we're going through the process of getting it abandoned. So it's a very interesting history of what to do moving forward. So I'm ready for that update.
With Lynn on the executive committee, I'm sure it'll be a lengthy discussion.
I'm sure that'll happen.
Considering every angle.
So, this is a current issue. Las Posas Users Group is looking at it. We've been looking at it. Their interest, most recently has been with the Waterworks District because most of the new wells in Las Posas have been drilled within the Waterworks District service area. But I understand that they're looking at it from a broader scale as well. And of course, Waterworks District is also involved in the discussions. And ultimately, if your board approves some sort of policy for Las Posas, just be advised that it has implications outside the Las Posas basins too. I mentioned it'll be coming to an executive committee meeting. This is a map showing where some of these water supplier service areas are. And what I wanted to do is just point out that these are new well permits issued in the last 4.5 years. So these are brand new wells. These aren't replacement wells. There have been some other wells drilled in here that are wells for water purveyors. We didn't show those. And 9 of these new wells are in the Waterworks District 1 up here. And for the most part, maybe all of them, for the most part, they're all going to be going on efficiency allocations. There are 4 in Waterworks District 19, which are new within the existing service area. And some of these service areas are kind of complicated, and it'll get figured out. But right now, I'd point out to you that within District 19, we also have zone, and we also have the Arroyo Las Posas Mutual Water Company. So, you know, if the agency does determine that moving these allocations forward is necessary, I suppose it could become more complicated if there are overlying water suppliers in there. Here's one that was installed in the Del Norte area. And the 2 that I mentioned in Pleasant Valley, these are down here. This is the Pleasant Valley service area. And then I'd also mention here, this is the Camarosa area, and we've got 2 new wells here in the last 4.5 years. And Camarosa is a little bit different in that it doesn't have much of or any historic allocation. They have a lot of what's called baseline allocation, which goes with the acreage. So it's possible that as your board considers moving allocation, maybe this discussion gets broadened to moving baseline allocation as well. Camarosa would be an example where that may be necessary to be consistent. And then some of these other wells are in the Callegas area or United area. I'm not too sure what implications that could have, but that's what it looks like right now. So the last 4.5 years, the agency's issued 27 well permits for wells within water supplier service areas. And with no exception, there haven't been any allocations moved from those water suppliers to the new well owner. So there's room for improvement in how the agency reviews and approves well permits. Your board might want to consider making the process more sensitive to groundwater conditions and basin management objectives. We talked about how essentially now we just approve them. So your board could shift from more of this ministerial type approval to more of a discretionary approval, and your board could set that level of discretion. And expansion of use issues related to well permitting and setting allocations, they will continue to be discussed, probably next at an executive committee meeting. And that's all I have. This is an information item, but of course, if you'd like it, you could open it for discussion.
Rick, can you, on this map that you provided, showing the 4.5 years and 4.5 years, is there any way of putting any highways or
Sure.
Some landmarks or something on there so you know? It'd be interesting to see where everything is.
I can do that, and I can send it to you.
All right.
Yeah.
Could you send it to everybody?
Yes, I'll send it to each of you.
Yeah, as simple as where the cities are and that kind of thing, and cities and highways.
Sure, just basic.
For benchmarks, basically.
Got it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else?
Well, you had the one that you had the background resource issue fall 2012. It shows we're at the end of Camarillo Hills as a reference point. It's being one, not that particular side, but the one. Okay, well.
Page 7?
Yeah.
Yes.
If the white in the center is Camarillo Hills, and so at the right-hand point of the Camarillo Hills would be the Bell Ranch site.
That's correct.
And so I think, for Director Nauman's point, that's kind of the confluence of 3 points there.
Yeah, they're right. It's like an intersection.
Exactly. And that's what's making it a bit difficult for everybody to figure out where are we. So I think that it's going to get determined by whatever thumbprint the water produces.
Okay, anything else?
No, we're good. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you very much. Is there a motion to receive and file, and this will be going on to the executive committee?
So move.
Second.
Motion and a second to receive and file. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposition?
Thank you.
What's the date for that executive?
August 12th.
Okay. Motion carried unanimously. Next is item number 6, Wayne J. Sand and Gravel application for baseline allocation dated February 14th, 2013. Could we have
And
the
this
staff
is-
report, please?
And this is an action item.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Chair and Directors. For the record, my name is Kathleen Rydell. I'm here to present item 6. Agency staff reviewed the baseline allocation request submitted on behalf of Wayne J. Sand and Gravel. It was received, even though it was dated February 14th, we received it officially on April 26, 2013, with supplemental information received as recently as June 25th, 2013. Refreshing, as you're aware, and as you keep in mind as we go through this presentation, baseline allocation. According to the ordinance code, a baseline allocation may be established for an operator if no historical extractions exist or historical allocation is less than 1 acre-foot per acre per year. In addition, a baseline extraction allocation specifically applies to undeveloped acreage that is being developed and once approved shall remain with that developed acreage, and that is per the ordinance code. The baseline allocation request is for baseline for 3 contiguous parcels located in the lower aquifer outcrop area along the northern edge of the East Las Posas Basin on the east side of Grimes Canyon Road. The baseline allocation request is for 1 acre-foot per acre of baseline allocation for the combined parcel area, and it was for the entire parcel combined of 196 acres. Wayne J. Sand and Gravel has applied to expand their operations to the State of California Office of Mining and Reclamation and to the County of Ventura Resource Management Agency Planning Division. The proposed expansion is to take place in 4 phases. The total project area involved in the 4 phases of mining would be 134.09 acres, with an estimated date of completion in the year 2046. The different phases and acreage associated with each phase and the estimated date of completion are, and is shown on these slides. Phase 1, 66.08 acres, with the completion of reclamation by 2027. Phase 2, 33.98 acres, completion of reclamation in the year 2032. Phase 3, 29.22 acres, with the completion of reclamation in the year 2041. Phase 4, completion, it's 28.31 acres, completion of reclamation in 2046. Measures to protect the aquifer and outcrop area are presented in the discussion and discussed in the Water Resources Protection Plan prepared by Hopkins Groundwater Consultants. That was submitted, as well as the reclamation plan prepared by Wayne J. Sand and Gravel. And going back to the ordinance code, a baseline allocation may be established for an operator if no historical extractions exist or historical allocation is less than 1 acre-foot per acre per year. So, in looking at the County of Ventura well database, it indicates that there are 2 active wells on the subject site. I have them marked and showing with arrows as well as their historic allocation. One well is located on the eastern parcel, and the well has a historical allocation of 29.596 acre-feet. And in the central parcel, there's a well that has a historical allocation of 1 acre-foot per year. And our central parcel has a baseline allocation of 2.0 acre feet per year. It was associated with the ranch housing farming operation at the southern end of that parcel. So therefore, the historical allocation is less than 1 acre foot per acre per year. Per the ordinance code, a baseline extraction allocation specifically applies to undeveloped acreage that is being developed, and once approved shall remain with the developed acreage. To determine the undeveloped acreage, a comparison of aerial photographs. This one is dated 1989, so you can see the limit of development. This is a 2012 aerial photo. You can see the change in development. And then we compared it to the Phase 1 area to be developed. The comparison indicates that 27.5 acres of the proposed 66.08 acre Phase 1 development have undergone limited development and will undergo future development, more extensive development, as mining continues. Beyond the 27.5 acres, an additional 38.58 acres are proposed for development during Phase 1. A table was prepared showing the parcels. It shows existing allocation, the area developed in 1989, and what has been developed as of the year 2012. It also shows the portions of the different phase areas that was developed as of 2012. The total project area, to keep in mind, development since 1989 has occurred on 59.7 acres of the combined 3-parcel area. That would include the 2 acres that they obtained baseline for the ranch area. And then the total project area for all 4 phases is 134.09 acres. In reviewing this application, to keep in mind, instead of there was a thought of possibly seeing as the dates, completion dates were so far out that probably giving baseline based on the phases, give an allocation for Phase 1, give an allocation for Phase 2. However, the state of California and the county of Ventura permitting process requires that Wayne J. Sand and Gravel provide evidence that there is adequate supply to meet the project demand for the lifetime of the project. The applicant provide an estimated annual demand during the life of the project, and that is 52.89 acre feet. The applicant's estimated annual groundwater demand of 52.89 acre feet is less than 1 acre foot per year baseline allocation of the initial. Sometimes we have given baseline based on development since 1989 to the present, and that was undeveloped as of the end of the base period 1985 to 89, and then what was since, because it was undeveloped at that time. And in the past, we have given, the agency has granted baseline allocation on development after 1989. So based on that criteria, 59.7 acre feet has been developed after 1989. And then if we look at undeveloped acres and what they're planning on doing, that would be a total of 134.09 acres for the project. This project is unique in that the water demand is needed during the life of the project. However, once the land is reclaimed and mining operations cease, the development water demand will no longer be needed. So, agency staff has discussed with the applicant and has they have agreed that they've been informed. We have discussed this with the applicant and have been informed that this will provide, if we grant a baseline allocation of 53 acre feet, that will meet their needs. And so agency staff recommends that your board consider and approve a baseline allocation of 53 acre feet per year that is rounding up the 52.89 acre feet estimated. and which would be in addition to the existing 2.0 acre-feet per year baseline allocation that's already on that central parcel. And then a second recommendation is, because conditions are unique to the proposed development, staff recommends that the board direct staff in the future to reevaluate and reduce the baseline allocation granted for this project when the land is removed from production and the reclamation program is completed. And Mr. Lawrence Faulkner is here of Jensen Design, representing Wayne J. Sand and Gravel, and he is also here to answer questions. So are there any questions?
Are there any questions of Kathleen?
Kathleen, as these numbers here are submitted, they take into account the 25% cutbacks we required of everybody in the agency?
The baseline allocations are not reduced.
They're not reduced?
They're not reduced.
Okay.
Historical allocation is reduced.
Okay. I just want to make sure we cross that T, because we've made others, and I don't want to be unfair. Great.
Yes.
I have one question, and you're not putting a batch plant in there also. This is strictly for washing the sand?
Well, we'll have him come up. But this is just questions for Kathleen.
Okay.
While she's standing there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there one or more people who'd like to talk for the applicant? Just please state your name for the record.
Hi, I'm Lawrence Faulkner with Jensen Design and Survey. You had a question about...
The water is going to be used on-site for washing material, is it not, rather than a batch plant where the water would get exported?
There is a component of the water that does get exported as moisture in the sand. That's inevitable. We figure about 8% of the weight of material leaving the site is actually water weight, because the sand is not absolutely dry. So in the application and in the water usage table, you will see a certain amount of water allocated for shipping in product due to that effect, a certain amount of water that is accounted for through evaporation in the settling ponds, and a certain amount of water that's allocated for dust control.
Because this is in our outcrop area, and so, any of it that doesn't leave the property will re-perk.
Yes, there is a portion that will leave as evaporation, of course, and then any moisture that's in the sand itself would also...
You haven't broken down what you think the numbers might be?
Correct, yeah, they are in that table that's presented.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you for your consideration.
Anyone else like to speak on this item? Did I see that you had another question? Maybe you've Kathleen? No? Okay. Okay, I'll open it up for board discussion. This is an action item.
Jeff, if I may, on this recommendation that Kathleen went through, if maybe the process would be put some motion together to have a discussion with, is there, if I hear anything, we're dealing with baseline and also referring to a historical allocation at the same time?
There's an historic baseline allocation, and then there are wells with the historical allocation, the 29. Is that what we're talking about?
The historical allocation was during the 1985 to 1989 developed, and it was for the area that was, I don't know if I can go
That's
back.
off the 3 parcels. It's for a separate area.
Yeah, it's different, and it's not part of this Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, Phase 4.
So the water resource they're using now is going to be basically moved over in phases in this process?
No, that what will happen, as proposed, is they will have new baseline allocation associated with these 3 parcels. Some of this parcel is already developed. Rather than give them a blanket 134 acre feet and leave it forever, we came to your board and said, this is actually what they're asking for, 53 on those 3 parcels, and it should probably go away when the operation goes away. Traditionally, your board's been loath to put restraints on some of the ordinance code, and so we wanted to make sure that you were okay with this, and certainly the applicant is.
So basically, we do have some timeline of sunsetting this process when it's complete.
Yes, we do, but we probably couldn't tell you what that is right now. We know the dates that they're supposed to be reclaimed, and further, we probably couldn't tell you how we're going to tickle this for the file 46 years from now, or 34 years from now. But
I was wondering about that.
We'll figure that out. That is the proposal before you.
That's the next item, we just digitize it.
Yeah, maybe the next presentation will clear that up.
The water usage chart that was in the graphics, it's item 6J in your agenda packet, if you wish to look at that.
I have a quick question. The applicant is okay, this setup works?
And for the record, he indicated, yes, it would be sufficient.
Yes. You know, I have a lot of respect for talents and the skills of the staff. So, if they modeled this together to make the footprint work correctly, and the applicant is pleased with it, I'm not hesitating to move forward with this. My concern is how to phrase a motion to put in place what we just talked about.
I think it's right here under recommendation.
I mean, you want that whole conclusion as a recommendation would that be the motion?
Starting with A, move that A.
Yes, I defer to Al on that one, but that would be my opinion.
Al, how would we address, so we make sure we don't miss the time frame that from the parcel to the 2 acre foot to the baseline, how would we address that as a motion?
If we started with A and included the second paragraph?
I'm sorry, I'm not seeing a...
There's not an A and B. If you take array under conclusions and recommendations, delete agency staff recommends establishing. Start with the word A.
A total
I
baseline.
move that A. And then including the second paragraph. Up to completed.
You ready? You want me to?
Al hasn't said if he thought that was adequate yet.
A little direction, so I don't want to miss anything in this process.
I think it would be sufficient to make a motion including the language under the conclusions and recommendations section of the staff report. I didn't hear anything that was additional or different.
End it right there.
In your
Okay,
board's discussion.
Al, let me take a stab at it, and if you could listen and follow it, and then if the fellow board members and Jeff and Rick pay attention. Okay, my motion is a total baseline allocation of 55 acre feet per year, 53 in parentheses, 53 acre feet per year added to the existing 2 acre foot baseline allocation, parentheses closed. New sentence. The baseline allocation would be linked to the parcels as follows. 43.0 acre feet per year be added to the existing 2 acre feet per year to parcel appraisal number 500-0-100-045 and 10.0 acre feet per year for parcel assessor parcel number 500-0-100-055 end period. The baseline allocation would become effective once the conditional use permit and reclamation plan are approved and phase 1 operations commence. Agency staff further recommends, or agency staff
Just further recommend,
further
move.
will evaluate the baseline allocation granted for this project, be evaluated and reduced when the land is removed from production and the reclamation program is completed.
Wouldn't that last portion just start with baseline?
Further move that.
Just say the
And
Al, can you, is that,
I believe that's sufficient.
okay. Mike, you want to, or Charlotte, or
The
David?
sentence would begin, baseline allocation granted for this project will be reevaluated and reduced when the land is removed from production and the reclamation program is completed.
Okay. You got that?
in a sense.
So that's a period after commence.
No.
Okay, so what Mike,
First
what
time in
you're
my life I
saying-
ever turned the damn
So
microphone
Mike, what
off.
you're saying is, after we finish Phase 1 operation commence. Period. We'll go, the baseline allocation granted
Correct.
for this project be reevaluated and reduced when the land is removed from production and reclamation project is completed. Okay, that is the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Everybody understand exactly what the motion is?
Does council concur?
Yes.
Everybody understand? Okay, is there any discussion on the motion?
I think it's appropriate.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries unanimously. Next item, digitization of agency account files. Could we have that staff report, please?
Good afternoon. Chair Craven, board members, Gerhard Hubner again. I do have a short presentation, but in the interest of time, I'm happy to defer it if that's your pleasure and answer any questions.
Everybody want the staff report? I have until 4 o'clock.
How long is it going to, are you talking about?
I'm pretty quick. I'll be quick. I can do it in 3 minutes.
Okay.
All right. Let's see if I can keep to that timeline. All right. As you know, the agency has approximately 600 owner-operator accounts filed alphabetically. They date back to the 1980s with the formation of the agency. We have well registration forms, semi-annual statements, irrigation efficiency allocation forms, meter calibration forms, and other records that go back, including maps, data, and photos. We have currently 3 5-drawer filing cabinets at the County Government Center. It's reasonably to say we are running out of physical storage space. We compete with other county agencies, including account files in my own the Watershed Protection Division files. Our county system has changed through time. They were at one time owner-operated. We have moved now to the ComCode system with multiple wells on a single document. Some of the benefits we've outlined in the staff report include having more immediate access to documents, having historical account data captured in an easy format for retrieval and as well as access. We believe there'll be some reduction in staff time, researching for documents. As you know, we've had to encounter or deal with several public records requests the past couple of years. Those do require a significant amount of time. We believe this will assist with that. And we also believe there'll be more government transparency. We did undertake a contract solicitation process. We contracted 2 entities that we were familiar with, at least through the district. That was Document Storage Services as well as Syntec Solutions. Ultimately, Syntec's statement of work best matched the agency's needs as well as the budget. As you note, the cost in the proposal is $12,960. A line item of $15,000 was included in the agency's fiscal budget, as well as work plan. That's been actually carried over for 2 years. With that, we recommend that you proceed to modernize the accounting file system by converting our paper document into electronic versions for the benefits I've described. There is a potential. This is a phase 1 program. We want to start with the operator accounts. We feel those are the most immediate need and benefit at this point. We might come back at a later date with a phase 2. We have a whole bunch of other files that I've described, but we want to assess the benefits first. So with that, we do have a recommendation before you today to enter into a contract or authorize the executive officer to enter in a contract with Syntec Solutions to conduct this file digitalization project.
Questions?
I would just say what's taking so long. I would say with the era that we're moving into with information and paper and everything, it's to me, it's a smart way to go. It's the best way to go. So if you've done your homework, I'll go ahead and make a motion.
Oh, we have more. Okay.
Oh,
We'll have discussion after the motion.
Okay.
Unless
Mr.
you
Hubner,
have a question.
I have a question.
Okay.
Is this recommended provider the same person who provides for public health and building safety?
I don't know that answer.
The
I'd
Elk
have- I'd have to
Grove
research
address
that,
rings
but-
a bell.
Okay.
Are you going to archive the existing paper?
Kurt, we will, at this point, we have no proposal before us to, as you were saying, archive or destroy. We'll keep those at a point, certainly for the immediate future, and come back with a proposal of what we ultimately want to do with those paper files.
I just endured a trip through building and safety and public health where they thought my sewer system was in the wrong place where I was proposing to put my tractor shed. This went on for several days. I finally, the person who did the sewer plant disappeared, died. His father remembered doing the job. Several minutes, hours, days later, found out building and safety had a copy of the actual plant permit that should have been over at public health or environmental health. The whole thing went a big circle. Nobody had all the documentation. Fortunately, I had all my cash checks. I had all the documentation. I could prove that it had actually been done to give them a place to look, but this went on for a long time, and the digitization of the whole thing lost the whole chain. So I don't look forward to this project nearly as much as Director Nauman does.
Well, I think that maybe document destruction and a policy for that, which I don't believe we have.
We have a draft. We haven't actually brought it before you, but we.
So we don't have one.
Correct. Yes, correct.
Doesn't exist.
It was just
Would
by the
have to
grace of
come
God.
that would have to come before us, and I think that's the time. But until we would approve a policy for document destruction or one action to destroy them, they will have to keep them.
Right, well, they have to keep them long enough to digitize them. But then that's where the damage will happen. I mean, I got lucky, but had I not had on my side of the fence all my documentation so I could give them a trail, I would have had to literally rebuild an entire sewer system for 2 properties, including probably whatever that would carry me through.
Okay, any other questions?
What's the, along the same line, the files get digitized, I guess they get stored on a computer someplace,
Yes.
and is there a backup on a
Generally, that
external
is-
hard drive,
that is
or
the
how
case.
does that work?
I have a representative from the district's IT section who's familiar with it, and
Yeah, it's Richard Mendez from Watershed Protection. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to have it stored on a Microsoft Cloud. Then as a backup, we will have a hard drive with everything on it, just in case something happens for Microsoft.
Then there was one more caveat that we added when we first authorized you to produce the new OS you're doing for your whole system here. That project was let, what, 2-3 years ago? The caveat was that this all software produced for this agency be transportable. So if we want to leave this building and leave this place, we can take it with us.
so your question is this system portable?
Well, is this transportable, portable?
Yes, this will all be web-based, so being in this building or somewhere else wouldn't matter. As long as we have an internet connection, we're good to go.
And it would not have to call home to this building and this system?
Not at all.
Thank you.
David, were you finished?
I was going to be facetious and just ask what the cost comparison was of buying 3 more file cabinets, but I'll leave it go.
I think it's more floor space. It's the cost per square footage generally in the building.
I'm just being a smart aleck.
Okay, is there a motion?
I so moved that we digitize the Fox County Groundwater Management Agency's account files.
With, enter into a contract with this company. Okay, for a cost of $12,000.
$12,960 for it.
There we go.
Not to exceed $12,960.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Very tentatively.
Until you vote no. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we have the executive officer's report, which consists of several reports to us. Is there a motion to receive and file?
Second.
Motion.
There is a correction to the executive officer's report. I'm sorry, I just caught this, but there is an executive committee meeting scheduled for August the 12th, 2013.
I believe that was scheduled after this
It was.
put together.
What's the time on that?
2 o'clock? Usual place?
It'll be 2 to 4 in the Atlantic Conference Room.
Say one more time.
2 to 4 in the Atlantic Conference Room.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We had a motion and a second for receive and file. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposition? Carries unanimously. Okay, meeting's adjourned.